really picky about that.
All right, so I believe it is now going to YouTube. So good evening, everybody. It is 6 p.m. I can confirm we do indeed have quorum. Currently absent from the committee is Councillor Amos. Also joining us this evening on the call is Desiree Kennedy, the Chief Financial Officer and City Treasurer, and Jeff Walker, the Manager of Revenue and Taxation. And with that, happy to turn it over to you, Mr. Chair, to get the meeting started.
Thank you. Call to order. I have us at 6 o'clock. Approval of the agenda. Can I get a mover of the agenda? Councillor Shave, seconded by Councillor Ridge. All in favor? Okay. Any confirmation of the minutes that the minutes of Administrative Policy Meeting number 2025-01 be held Wednesday, December 11th be approved? Can I get a mover of the approval of the minutes? Councillor Ridge, seconded by Councillor Stephen. All in favor? Passes. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. There's no delegations, no briefings. We will move on to business. Business, we have 2025 tax ratios. The report of the Chief Financial Officer and City Treasurer is attached, and I assume Ms. Kennedy will be doing this portion of the briefing or introduce the same.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, no, I am delegating tonight. Mr. Walker is here, and he's actually going to present the report to the committee.
Mr. Walker, you have the virtual floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was too slow on putting my camera on there. The purpose of the report in front of you tonight is to present the committee with recommendations for setting the property class tax ratios for the 2025 tax year. The Municipal Act requires that Council passes a bylaw each year to set tax ratios, and these tax ratios are then applied to the residential tax rate to distribute the tax burden among different property classes. Total taxation revenue is established as part of the operating budget estimates and does not change as a result of adjusting tax ratios. The tax ratios simply distribute the tax burden among different property classes. Tax ratios are often used when there's a provincial reassessment to prevent any large shifts of the tax burden caused by relative changes in the assessments among different property classes. They can also be used, though, to lower tax rates on a particular class of property. As Ontario's planned reassessment continues to be postponed in the 2025 year, there are no reassessment-related tax burden shifts, and the property tax burden across property classes has remained consistent. As such, the 2025 recommended tax ratios remain consistent with those that were established in 2024, and those recommended tax ratios comply with council direction, policy measures, and legislative requirements as outlined in the report. In the report, we also took the opportunity to provide some information on various tax policy options that the province has introduced that staff are continuing to monitor in 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I see Councillor Ridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I just had a quick question. It was noted in the report about the sorry, it's hard to switch from one window to another here. The new multi-residential subclass. Would staff be willing to speak to that just a little bit?
Absolutely, through you, Mr. Chair. So that is a policy that the province brought out that allows us to lower the tax ratio on the new multi-residential tax class. So we have the multi-residential tax class, which has a tax ratio of 1.7, but new multi-residential construction goes into the new multi-residential tax class, which is assessed at the same rate as residential taxation. This would allow us to provide a further discount to properties that are coming as of the date that we would enact the new class into that. So it would be new construction would go into the new multi-residential subclass. at a lower tax rate than residential. So it's used to try and spur development. We do at this point have the half funding, the Housing Accelerator funding that we are also using to new multi-residential properties. And I see that the treasurer has put her video on, so she may wish to add to what I am telling you.
Ms. Candy?
Thank you. No, not a whole lot to add. I was just going to say that this came out right around the time that we had just finalized the rental housing community improvement plan. And that is being funded not from tax dollars, but from the Housing Accelerator Fund monies. And so we moved ahead with that. This would obviously have a cost to the municipality if we were going to do this. This would cost the other tax classes would basically go up. So we went with the other one at that point, but we are continuing to kind of keep an eye on this one and see if anybody else is using it from other municipalities.
Councillor Ridge?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. Sorry, I did one of my master's papers on this, so I just have a few questions. This will be my last one, I promise. CFO Kennedy just mentioned that changing the tax ratio would inadvertently cause additional burden on the other tax classes. Is that why our tax ratio for new multi-residential is 1.7 as opposed to 1.0 to 1.1, which is in the range of fairness as defined by the province?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I'll start on this, but I think Mr. Walker may want to add some to it. So our multi-res, just going back a little bit of history, actually we took it down to 1.7. It used to be at 2.1. Actually, I think it was maybe even a bit higher than that. And the province had across the province legislated that it was to come down. The 1.7 actually represents some analysis that we did at the time between condominiums and rental properties and how those are valued within impact. And so we were trying to use a ratio that would align those values. So whether you owned it or you were renting it, there was some similarity in terms of that. So that's how we came down to the 1.7. I don't know, Jeff, there may be something you want to add to that.
No, that's what I would suggest, that we are happy at the 1.7 as a value for multi-residential properties, as they are assessed differently. They're based on the income that the property as a whole can generate for the owner of the multi-residential building, as opposed to the individual values of the units as in a condo type building. So to try to even out the taxes between units, that's where that tax ratio comes in.
Councillor Ridge, do you have any follow-up questions?
No, that's it. Thank you very much for that thorough explanation. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I see Councillor Stephen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. Just want to jump on that train of thought that Councillor Ridge started. So if we were to change the new multi-residential subclass and decrease it, that would increase the tax burden on other classes, really. So the small business property subclass, there was something in the report about the province will automatically match municipal property tax decreases with any municipality that adopts the subclass. So this is different. I was wondering if staff could explain a bit how this is sort of similar but different to the multi-residential situation. Thank you.
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Chair. So this was announced in the 2020 budget, I believe, and municipalities were able to start using this in 2021. To date, there hasn't been a whole lot of uptake on it because of some of the difficulties involved in identifying the properties that would be included into the subclass and ensuring that we're helping the properties that we want to. There is a link in the report that goes to our 2023 tax ratio report where we did talk a bit more about this. But basically, it's up to the municipality to decide the criteria for how properties that are going to be in the subclass would qualify for it. So it may be an area of the city, like a downtown block or a core, or properties that are in the DBIA. There's municipalities that have done it for properties that are in a building with that's under a square footage a certain square footage that they would apply. You can also have where properties apply to be in the subclass. It's rather difficult for us to track the properties that would be available because we don't have a lot of the data that you may want on a small business to know that, such as revenue or ownership type. So that's sort of been the hesitation of municipalities moving forward with the subclass, but it is available and it is one that we can choose the ways that we target properties that would qualify. When it first came out, a lot of the talk was around properties being included into this that were in an area of a city where it was felt that the building that they were in was not being assessed based on its current use, that it was maybe being assessed more on a highest and best case use where the value of taxes that were being charged were quite a bit higher than perhaps they would be if this property was just being taxed based on its current use. That's not a situation that we have in conversations with the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation on that, to be assured that the vast majority of our properties are based on their current use. So in that way, we didn't see it as having as much of an effect here, but we certainly could target a certain area of the city or a certain type of business to be included into a subclass.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that explanation. I think what I've sort of taken from that is, good in theory, but really difficult in practice is
That's
the takeaway. Okay.
I would agree that that is what we're hearing.
Okay. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, just one other question that I have. So I know, we've been hearing MPAC hasn't reassessed and they've postponed. And so eventually that's coming. Understanding is sort of a two-part question. So my understanding is if someone has done renovations on their home, which required a building permit, they may have been reassessed. Is that correct so far?
That is correct. MPAC does throughout the every year, they do continue to add new assessment to the roll and to change assessments on properties that have undergone a change, whether that's to remove a structure off of the property where they would go through one of the tax applications that we bring to admin policies, or as you were mentioning, through new construction where we follow up with MPAC to ensure that they are assessing those properties on a regular basis and bringing those on as quickly as possible.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. So if we have some homes that are being reassessed, and I mean, I assume, the value could go up or down, I suppose, depending, probably more likely to go up, the value of the property. And so those people are having these higher taxes in theory, and please, I'll give you a moment to correct me if I'm wrong on this. I'm trying to wrap my head around all of this, but the MPAC reassessment piece. So we're having, I guess what my ultimate question is it happening fairly right now where when people are reassessed, they're paying more? Okay. And second question is,
sorry,
can I ask my second part? And then thank you. And then the second part is, how will this ultimate reassessment that's coming impact people and their taxes? Will tax rates go down? Will the ratios change? How does that work? Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. First thing, I want to apologize. I wasn't clear enough. When MPAC assesses a new property's construction, so if you just built your property this year, they are going to assess that based on the value that it would have had as of January 1st, 2016. So it's as the property sits today, but it's as the value would have been in January 1st, 2016, the same as every other property in the municipality's valuation date. So that's the first thing. It is a level playing field as of that January 1st, 2016 date. The more the problem with the reassessment being delayed would be that it doesn't account for changes between property classes. So every residential property is assessed as of the same date and commercial property, et cetera, as of the same date. But in current terms, perhaps one class of property is more valuable these days than another class compared to the 2016 market time. So that's sort of the first part. And then, correct me if I remember, I think the second part, you're asking what's going to happen in the next reassessment as far as between property classes.
Yeah, that's right. How will that impact the whole system, I guess?
That is sort of the question that we don't really know right now. We have had some preliminary information from MPAC because we were kind of worried that residential was perhaps going to go up much quicker than every other class. We've been assured that that's not the case, that classes are going up relatively evenly, with a couple perhaps higher than others, but residential was not higher than the other classes. When we do get a reassessment, be that 2 years from now or 3-4 years from now, we will be coming back to council with this same admin policies report, where we will provide options to council to either lower a tax ratio in a class that has been hurt more through the reassessment than others, or perhaps to use revenue neutral tax ratios, where we just keep the same level of taxation that you're seeing in the report for this year in a future year, that if residential was 70% or 68% of the taxes, they would remain at 68%, and commercial at 21%, etc. That's all things that will be brought to your attention when there is a reassessment to look at. In the last reassessment period in 2016, there were 2 classes in particular, the multi-residential class and the farm tax class, that both received much higher increases than the rest of the city. And through this administrative policies committee, council made the decision to lower the tax ratios on those 2 classes, phased in over the 4 years of the reassessment. So the multi-residential tax ratio, as the treasurer was mentioning, went from 2.1 down to 2 right away, as there were some legislation changes, but then it was lowered each year down to 1.7 by the time the phase-in was complete in 2020. So it went down from 2 to 1.9 to 1.8 to 1.7 each year of the reassessment as the increases were phased in. The farm class, sort of the same thing. We went from 0.25 of the residential tax rate over the 4 years down to 0.2 of the residential tax rate. And those are things that will be brought again with suggestions as to how we might mitigate any unwanted impacts of a reassessment whenever it does occur.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for that detailed explanation. I find that incredibly helpful. So we're going to have, presumably, hopefully we're around on council, but we will be having some interesting conversations in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. So I have a question, and following up on Councillor Stevens' question. So when a large tax reassessment is done through MPAC, it doesn't change the amount of tax revenue the municipality receives, if I'm understanding the method correctly, but it does change the overall tax ratios, and then it would be up to the city to rebalance that. But a municipal tax holder for, say, a residential property would pay more taxes, but it would just, is that my understanding of how that works? Like, what's the impact from like a residential property owner when the tax ratios change, or when MPAC does a reassessment system wide?
Through you, Mr. Chair, you're absolutely correct. We would not be collecting more revenue because of a reassessment. The first thing that we do when setting tax ratios is we say, at the end of the year with the growth, what would the tax ratio, or what would the tax rate need to be to raise the same amount of taxation that we raised last year? Then we look at what is council asking us to raise this year, and we set a new tax rate based on that. The tax ratios just distribute that amount out amongst the property classes. So if we use those to mitigate, then that would change who's paying what percentage of the tax bill, but the amount that we're raising is not going to increase because of a reassessment. If every property in the city doubled in value, then the tax rate would be cut in half.
Okay.
In simplistic terms in order to raise. So your tax bill would be the same if council told us to raise the same amount of money as the previous year,
Okay.
and everyone doubled.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Are there any other questions from any other counselors? Oh, okay. Any members of the public?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are no members of the public present.
Okay. So we have a recommendation from staff that council approve the 2025 tax ratios as follows, and I'm not going to read them out for the sake of time. And that council approve the attached Exhibit A, report number AP 25006, and establish the tax ratios. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Councilor Ridge, second by Councilor Hassan. Any discussion? Comments, questions? I'll call the vote. All in favor? And that carries. We have no other business. No motions, no notices of motions. Any other business? Seeing none. No correspondence. The date of the next meeting of administrative policies is scheduled for Thursday, April 10th, 2025 at 6 p.m. And I will get a motion of adjournment. Councilor Shaves, second by Councilor Stephen. All in favor? And we stand adjourned at 6:21 p.m. Thank you, everyone.